Good afternoon and welcome to a special meeting of the Glendale City Council being called to order today on Tuesday, March 26th at 3:03 p.m. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Asadurian?
Here.
Devine?
Here.
Kasakian?
Here.
Najarian? Here. And Mayor Brotman?
Here, and I understand, Councilmember Kasakian is at home. You can see him, he's not feeling well with a cold, hopefully not serious, not serious, but doesn't want to come in and infect the rest of us. So I think we have to vote on allowing him to participate remotely. Is that right?
That's correct.
So I'll move to permit Councilmember Kasakian to participate via Zoom due to a medical emergency?
I'll
Emergency,
second.
just a
Medical.
Situation.
And I'll second.
Okay, and let's have a roll call vote on that, please.
Councilmember Asadurian?
Yes.
Devine?
Yes.
Kasakian?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
And Mayor Brotman?
Yes. Okay, with that out of the way, may we have your report?
The agenda for the Tuesday, March 26, 2024 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on March 21st, 2024 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Okay, and our first item of business today?
First item is community development regarding use of the city days at the Alex Theater Armenian Genocide Commemoration and Rhythm is Us show. A motion to approve use of one of 12 annual city days at the Alex Theater for the Armenian Genocide Commemoration event on Sunday, April 21st, 2024, and to cover the costs associated with labor and additional equipment rentals at the theater for the day. And B would be motion to approve use of one of 12 annual city days at the Alex Theater for the Jacob Armen presentation of Rhythm is Us on a mutually agreement weekday.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mayor Brotman, members of City Council. You have seen these reports previously. Today's request is for 2 separate days out of the 12 designated for city functions and events. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tom Arsad, our Deputy Director of Community Development, to present the report.
Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Glanian, Mayor Brotman, members of council. As Mr. Glanian mentioned, this is for 2 separate requests. The first one is for the Armenian Genocide Commemorative event, which is scheduled for Sunday, April 21st at 4 p.m. With that, the city, because the city is the sponsor of the event, we would also be covering the labor costs and any rentals associated with the theater use that day. The second request is for Jacob Armen presenting Rhythm is Us. The date for that event has not yet been set, but Jacob Armen has produced former shows at the Alex Theater, and those shows have sold around 1,100 tickets each. His request would just be for the city, the rental-free day, one of our 12 days. The concert will be a synergy of Jacob's unique worldly sound, featuring internationally known artists and various musical acts and dancers of all kind and unique performances. For the Armenian Genocide Commemorative event, this year's focus is 1.5 million plus, honoring the resilience of the survivors and remembering the victims of the Armenian Genocide. The program will feature captivating traditional Armenian dance and musical performances by talented local students and community members, making it an event not to be missed. The official marketing for that event will be forthcoming in the next week or so, and we'll be sure to have that publicized throughout the city. And for those interested in requesting future sponsorships from the city for rental-free days at the Alex Theater, we have placed the sponsorship information on the Community Development website under Administration. It's also on the Alex Theater website. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions, as is Miles Williams with the Alex Theater and Jacob Armen.
No public speakers on this item?
Mayor, we have no callers on this item or any
Councilmember?
comments.
Sorry.
Can Jacob come forward?
Yeah, that's what I.
Hi, Jacob.
Hello, how are you?
You're Albert's son?
Yes, I am.
So it's been a while since I've seen you,
Yeah.
but I do remember seeing you first as a musical prodigy. Was it the Johnny Carson show?
It was.
On
yeah.
the Johnny Carson show,
Right.
you were probably about 4 or 5.
It was 7.
7,
Right.
not whacking away, but doing an
That was-
incredible job on the drums. And
Thank you.
I'm honored that you picked the Alex Theater to do some of your performances.
It feels, yeah.
And I know your dad was a great musician as well, and I'm sure taught you or influenced you in your career. So I'm very happy to, I guess we're permitting you the use of one of our free days at the Alex. I very much support that and glad that you're doing the show in Glendale.
Wow, I really appreciate that, and thank you for this. And yeah, Glendale to me is like home, and I've done several shows at the Alex, so it just feels right in every way to do it. And this mission is to really bring communities to the community together, especially in the Glendale community for the arts. And so, and it's going to be that kind of an event. So that's the whole mission, to bring people and the communities together, especially the city of Glendale. And I'm honored and humbled to do my best to represent the city. So it's my hometown.
I thank you, Mayor. I have a question. It mentions in the report that you have Glendale artists involved in
Right.
this.
I want to bring native artists as well, and those who have not had that, moment to
Exposure.
present themselves on stage, especially at the Alex Theater, to give that kind of an opportunity or share that, So it's to help to inspire and to create that energy and to, promote unity.
Now, I know you don't have a date yet, but can you give me an idea of like how long the show is, like what time it would start and what time it would end? Is it like a couple hours or
I
one?
would say it's a couple hours with, an intermission.
And it's, an intermission, is it mostly jazz or?
Oh, it's going to be encompassing all different styles. So it's something you have to see, but it does encompass a lot of different genres, mostly world music, but the theme of it is going to be the rhythm. And it's also philosophical because it just goes beyond music. It's about life. Like right now, we're all here in rhythm and speaking together. And there's just so much that goes to that. And I just want people to come and experience that through the show and through the music and the melodies.
Sounds great. I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Questions, comments?
I'll just say I've been following your work for many, many years, and I've had the honor of being in your home. Your dad was also not just a great person that pushed out great music, but also a lot of education specifically to the Armenian community on issues that impact us, especially during those years where he would report what's happening on the council on a weekly basis.
Right.
This is like maybe 15 years ago. So I'm thrilled to have this, and
Thank you.
I think this is going to be a great event. Looking forward to it.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you so
Councilmember
much.
Kasakian?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm just glad that we are promoting local artists and the work that you're doing through your skills to promote the arts. I know that you will use portions of the proceeds to help promote the arts, and for that reason, I support it. Obviously, the genocide commemoration event is also important for the city to sponsor, because years ago, when there was a lot of division in this community regarding the lowering of the American flag to half staff, there was a commission that was put together made up of residents and citizens to determine what the city would do in lieu of lowering the flag to appropriately commemorate the memory of those lives that were lost in the Armenian genocide. And one of the explicit takeaways from that was that the city would sponsor an event every year to make sure that the city appropriately commemorated the Armenian genocide. So keeping in line with that, I think both of these events are appropriate for the city to sponsor, and I will be voting in support of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm a little embarrassed to say I don't know much about your work. I'm kind of the newcomer here of among us, but I'm looking forward to the show and to learning more and hopefully getting to know you.
Sure.
So, yeah, on the Armenian commemoration for the Armenian genocide commemoration event, I know that we have made a change, so we're having that on a Sunday. April 21st. Well, this isn't for you.
Right.
You could actually sit down.
All right.
Sorry
Thank
to
you,
keep you
guys. No
standing there
worries.
while we're
Appreciate
talking,
it.
but I know we made a change. So we are holding the event on Sunday, not on, normally it would be on the 24th on Wednesday, but I don't know if everybody is aware of that, and you might want to, is there anything you want to say about that?
Sure. I think one of the big changes that we're looking to make this year is having community organizations and businesses join as official partners. I think one of the issues that we've had over the years that it's really become an event that is commemorated and attended mainly by the Armenian community, and this is something that needs to be more educational and a citywide event that incorporates other folks, our residents and our businesses. So I know that we're going to be sending out a letter to businesses and our nonprofits to join as official sponsors, not official sponsors, as official partners, which include things like promoting the event, getting their employees and members to also commit to attending, because this is very much in line actually with what we've talked about for other events where, if it's, Korean Day, we see a lot of the Korean community come out, and I think it's important for us to ensure that we're bridging the gaps between communities, and we're stronger when we're more educated and united in both celebrating and commemorating the past and the future of all communities.
Good. So with that, I'll take a motion.
A second.
So that's 1A and 1B. 1A and 1B. Okay, motion and a second. Motion by Councilmember Devine, second by Councilmember Satchel. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Asadrian,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Kasakian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
and Mayor Brotman.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for the attendees representing the Alex. Okay, item number 2, could you read that one into the record?
Community development regarding improvements to the entitlement and permitting process. A motion providing council feedback on the proposed work plan to improve the entitlement and permitting process.
Thank you. Mr. Galani, you want to kick that
Yeah.
off?
Yes, certainly. Mayor Brotman, member of City Council, in response to council's comments, as well as staff's continuing efforts in streamlining and making improvements to our entitlement and permitting process, they have generated this list, some of which have already been completed, and some will require additional public outreach. And this afternoon, they'll be seeking input from council, especially those that relate to code and policy changes. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Calvert, our Director of Community Development, for the presentation of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. As City Manager outlined, we are here with an update on the improvements that we're attempting to make here for the entitlement and permitting process. The intent of today's meeting, kind of two parts. We wanted to provide an update of what's been accomplished thus far, what we're moving forward with. And if you recall from the meeting last winter in 2023, there was this, a last section to our spreadsheet that listed off a number of potential changes that could occur. We had solicited council's perspective on things that they've heard or things that they would like to see us make changes to. We've gone back, examined those, examined the feasibility, see if they could fold into some other existing initiatives that are on that list. And what we're really looking for is direction on that last category, what we're considering to be code and policy changes. And when I say direction, it's if that list is including the things that you anticipated, if there are things that you would like to add to this list. We do consider this to be a fluid document that will track our progress, but will also continue to grow if we identify other improvements. With that being said, the direction that we're looking for is that if the council approves of that list, for us to begin the process of public engagement to explore whether or not these changes could be made. Again, I emphasize that we have not made the changes in that last section, with the exception of some that were already approved by council about a year or so ago that you'll see on April 2nd. This is simply for us to begin the process of engaging with the public to gain their perspective on whether or not they believe these changes should also occur. So that's where the primary direction we're looking for. Otherwise, we just want to provide an update on some of the things that have been in progress. To date, we have started a number of major initiatives to try to reduce the timeline for permitting and entitlement. What I mean by those are the building and safety, building permits, and our entitlements from our planning division. Some of those, as you saw just a couple weeks ago, we came for approval for to begin the process of developing our pre-approved ADU program. That's something that's in the works now. The council had the opportunity to see what some of those alternatives could look like. As you're also aware, we've been working on updating our mixed-use and multifamily development standards. We were actually before you that same week to solicit some additional perspectives and opinions regarding some of those changes. You will see those come forward for introduction in the next month or so. And eventually adoption. We believe that's going to make a major step forward for us in terms of objective development standards that give some certainty and clarity to our applicants, and also some certainty and clarity in what the final product will look like to the community. We have a number of express permits that have recently been launched. I believe we're up to 7 total now, with a couple more on the way. That means someone can come in or apply for those and instantly get an approval. We used to do that as kind of an over-the-counter operation. One of the challenges of moving to the online permitting system is that when that application is filed, it then has to be routed, and that typically takes a couple days. That was one of those disadvantages. We're now essentially back to an over-the-counter style approval for that. We are looking at, and we have in many cases in terms of issuing new bulletins and how we route some of our reviews, is eliminating certain divisions or even departments where it's not necessary, where we know we don't need a fire review, where planning does not need to take a second or third look at something that they've already approved. That helps to reduce some of those slowdowns as that kind of enters into each staff member's queue. We continue to work with other departments in that regard. Actually, I just had the opportunity of sitting down with our new AGM for water over at GWP, and we're meeting here in the coming weeks to figure out how we can continue to advance those across, and how we work across departments to expedite that review process or maybe take out unnecessary review. We've been working on updating bulletins and checklists. Those bulletins are intended to serve as public information for our applicants so that we're giving them clear and upfront information to help them access what they need early on, hopefully to make that process a little bit easier for them. There's been several fixes and improvements to the Intergov system. You'll see there's a number of them also listed and have been completed in that kind of spreadsheet that we provided as an exhibit. New exemptions for geotechnical reports where that wasn't necessary. That helped to streamline some of that work as well, reduce potential weeks or months in some cases for applicants, actually, sorry. And then continuing to fill our staff vacancies. We've been very fortunate to add a number of new staff. One part that I'm very excited about is we've been able to add staff from the private sector who I think understand what it's like to be on the other side of that table, and they can help recognize, even in their early days here with us at the city, where we can improve because they've sat on the other side of that table. And then one thing I left off of here, we're now using a third-party service to help us in our review of accessory dwelling units so that we can help move those on a little bit faster, get those off of some of our staff members' plates so they can focus on some of the bigger and larger projects and some of these initiatives to move forward some of the improvements. I had mentioned, I believe it's under the first line under the policy and code changes, some streamlining that we are working towards. This was per council's direction about a year ago. The items that you see listed here are going to be coming back next week in the afternoon. The council instructed that we move forward with. We think that these changes here, I believe there's about 7 or 8, will make some significant impacts in terms of the length of time it takes for relatively smaller projects to go through our process. I think one of the biggest challenges we've had, one of the biggest challenges and complaints we've heard is that relatively minor improvement or changes are going through a process that's similar to a brand new multifamily development or a brand new single family house. So making some of these changes is really going to assist in that, where we can give exemptions for DRB for things that are not visible. We have this obscure rule where our retail or our auto retailers have to provide parking for their inventory, which I think kind of flies in the face of our goal of reducing parking requirements in the city. So some modest changes like that we think will help out with a lot of different application types. So you'll see that coming forward, and there'll be a broader discussion on those on April 2nd. But those have been before council before, and per council's direction, we have moved forward with that, and we are ready to adopt and make those changes in our code. As mentioned, one of the things that we're really looking for feedback from City Council here today is that last category in that exhibit that you have. We have put together a list of things that we had heard from our applicants and our stakeholders, essentially those that we work with quite frequently, developers, architects, small businesses, as well as our staff, and then taking that input from the City Council as well. Some of the things that you see on there, removing design review when it's a like-for-like situation, overhauling our pre-application process. That's a big one for us that we really want to move forward with, because the best way I could describe that is our current pre-application process is asking an applicant to come into the door with essentially what I would consider to be a 70% drawing package to basically ask us if they can do a project. We believe that needs to be scaled way down, so that we catch them earlier on. So that way we're offering guidance rather than trying to provide a corrective action, if you will. Also, the applicants will not have invested so much in what they're working on. It may find themselves less frustrated if we are able to provide that guidance earlier on, rather than having them, they've developed so much on that project already. We've been requested to look at removing the minimum unit size. That was something we had heard from council before, but I think we are now in a position to be able to consider that. Overhauling our parking standards. That means coming in line with some of the state requirements that are now in place. That means counting our EV parking spaces towards our parking as well. So the intent there is to modernize our parking standards, but to also remove any unnecessary paperwork or hurdles when we're going through some of the state requirements or some of those opportunities where parking can be reduced. Considering gentle density within single-family districts, whether that's duplexes or triplexes, are there areas that are appropriate for it? Studying the use of FAR versus dwelling unit per acre. We know that is a better way of measuring residential density when we're thinking about multifamily. It could assist us in achieving some of our housing goals as well when you combine that with the maximum unit size modifications potentially. We've heard requirements on fences. Can we remove unnecessary review if we just simply state exactly what it is we want? This is a yes or no situation. We have several on this list that kind of fall into that category. Considering possible changes in historic districts for non-contributors. Are there avenues to make that an easier process for some of those homes? Simplifying our window permit is probably the #1 item on, I think, all of our staff's hit list. We know that causes a lot of frustration. In fact, when we did our department retreat last year, it elicited a number of chuckles from our non-planners and non-professionals, again, trying to understand why it's as complicated as it is. I know myself and our building official, Ara Sagizian, have spent a little bit of time following our city manager's philosophy of using less words and striking through the document that I believe is about 19 pages long, and I think we can get that down to a front and back guidance sheet for our staff, but also just making that an easier process. Replacing signs. That has been a bit of a challenge as well. When we measure the height of our buildings, not counting our stair and elevator overruns as part of that, that tends to impede a development reaching its maximum potential, kind of fitting in with that objective development standards that we're trying to pursue in other districts. Making a lot of improvements to our tenant improvement permits. Those we have found a lot of challenges with, and that's going to include removing unnecessary divisions or departments from review, simplifying that process in general, not treating that as a brand new construction, because that's often where it kind of ends up. A lot of times we have to put this in the hands of our concierge team to help move that along. And those are not necessarily difficult permits. Actually, I listed some of those twice on a copy-paste job, so my apologies on that. But these are just kind of a run-through of some of the major items that are in there. Again, we are not seeking direction to implement these. We are seeking direction from the council to begin the public engagement process so that we can come back to council and demonstrate how this could or could not improve the process and what the general public sentiment is towards that. Otherwise, the other first 4 categories that are in your exhibit, those are really kind of internal-facing items. We've tried to mark off the things that are in progress, the things that have been completed, and that is going to be a continuously evolving list that we're working towards and moving forward with. So otherwise, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I assume we're going to have some questions here. Councilmember
I
Devine.
have some. Thank you. Thank you, Bradley, for this. Looks like you've been doing a lot of work.
We are working on it, yes. I will add that our building official, R. Sargisian, Deputy Director Eric Kraus for Community Development and Planning, and our Principal Administrative Officer and Wizard of All, Joseph Rodarte, are all here to also assist in answering questions.
Great
for their own
job, great
specialties.
job. My first question is about the private sector that you mentioned. In what capacity? Are they in plan check? Are they in, what are they doing? The private sector that you say are on the other side of the,
Oh, what I meant is some of our new staff are coming from the private sector that we've hired into our divisions and department.
that have not been in business or in a professional business? Is that what you
They've
mean?
worked in for private architects, private engineers, and we've been able to bring them and hire them as staff members here at the city, and they lend that outside perspective for us.
Okay. Now, I received an email, and the walk-in counter has been mentioned in the changes, and I received an email that said that it's not open. The counter is not open. Is it? Isn't it? How often is it open?
Our counter is open. It's open by appointment from 7 a.m. to noon. There are times where we do take walk-ins if there's capacity or if we're trying to resolve a situation. Honestly, the challenge right now of going back to walk-ins on that is just staffing level. We need to be able to be fully staffed in order to operate that counter and man that counter so that we can accept walk-ins. What I would say is that if we were to just leave that open for walk-ins, and depending on the volume of customers that come in, that's going to prevent our staff from being able to do the actual review of the projects. We have, as part of that third-party service that is assisting us with ADUs, has started training on the counter because we were hoping to actually have a third-party person assist us in staffing that counter, and we're hoping maybe that will get us more in that direction of walk-ins.
Get us to the counter being open all day. I noticed that's long-term. It's like 1 year you have on your chart, the timeline.
It is, and it's really dependent on that staffing level. We need to have enough staff to be able to do that.
And so those that are not technologically adept, they have to make an appointment to come in, and
Correct.
they can't go online and do all
Well, they
of
go
that.
online to make that appointment. And again, if we have the capacity, we don't turn someone away if they do happen to show up, and we have that availability to meet and speak with them.
Okay,
I will allow Joseph to.
jump in.
Afternoon, Mayor, council members, city staff. I'm Joseph Rodarte for Building and Safety. What Bradley is speaking about is true, that, the planning division does have by appointment only, but it's a one-stop center for everybody. Public Works, neighborhood services, fire and such. No appointments are required. If somebody does have an ability to, a technical issue or anything like that, they can come to the counter anytime between 7 and 12 and ask for assistance.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's more so because as we were talking about staffing levels and low levels of planning staff, they aren't able to accommodate what building and safety and everybody else has, who has a little bit higher level right now and are able to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I hope the fellow that wrote me that email is listening today. Another design review. Revised DRB board member qualifications to require some design background for design review. That's kind of ambiguous. What are we looking for? Because when I'm interviewing, I always look for like someone that has architecture or is a designer of some sort, not a real estate broker or something like that. What are you looking?
That was feedback that we heard from some of our stakeholders, and I think the intent behind that was to ensure that there was a minimum threshold of qualifications. I think obviously we could all have a different interpretation of what we think would be successful on the board, and I think it was just a request to kind of memorialize that and put a minimum kind of threshold of qualifications. That's something I think we would need to come back on a broader conversation. We also list that
Okay.
as a long-term item as well. We also don't think that that's as urgent as some of the other changes that need to be made.
Of course.
So,
Okay, I just thought maybe if you had some ideas. The third is on the changes in the historic district. Now, I don't know that the staff report said it was for non-contributors.
I mean, that would really be the primary change that I think we could make. And I think even any conversation around that's a bit preemptive at this point. I think having some public engagement around this conversation is going to be important. It's really more of a general sentiment that we heard from some of the applicants, some of the stakeholders, that they found it difficult to make changes. In some cases, whether it's a contributor or not. But I think that's a much broader conversation that needs to be had before we could say yes or no to any changes to that.
Okay,
kind of
okay,
work.
but we're still thinking along the line of, that they will meet the district guidelines and the Secretary of Interior's
Absolutely,
standards?
that would not change at all,
Okay.
Councilmember.
Okay, great, great. And now on the appeals, the fees, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance, and I don't want to broadside you, but do we have any idea how many appeals we've had, like, in the last year? I mean, to raise, I know it's difficult for a homeowner sometimes to raise funds for these appeals, and so to raise them would make it a little more difficult for a lot of the neighbors. Have we had a lot of appeals? It just doesn't seem to me that the number is that great that we need to stop them for any reason.
Councilmember, I think we would need to go and dig up that information and kind of see what the pattern is over the past couple of years. If I may, I think one of the most important things to the appeal process would be us establishing a minimum or maximum timeline of returning that to council. That would be the most effective and important thing that we could do. I know that there's a fee study item coming up as part of the budget discussion, and that may be part of that there. But I think for us to be able to establish that kind of maximum time frame is going to be the most important thing that we can do in terms of appeals.
Okay, all right. I think that's it. Oh, I did have a question about, I'm sorry, Dick. In this one phrase, and I don't know exactly what it means, the inclusion of concurrent review allows projects to be reviewed by both planning and building and safety in order to reduce the overall amount of review time. It should be noted that this will be at the risk of the applicant through a hold harmless letter. What exactly does that mean?
So for an applicant to go into building and safety's review prior to receiving planning approval, there is some risk associated with that. If they have to go to the DRB and there are changes that are requested by the DRB, if something's found during the planning review, that could change the documents that are submitted to building and safety. If that is the case, then essentially what we're asking for is that hold harmless letter that they're doing this at their own risk. They are essentially they're confident enough in their work so much that they are willing to move forward in both on a parallel path, but they're doing it at their own risk. Gotcha. That was actually something we heard very early on. I would say it was probably spring of 2022, and we did a small kind of roundtable with some of the local developers and stakeholders, and that was one of the first things they asked for, is that ability to run both of those simultaneously. Yeah. We have been doing that already. And we've been taking the hold harmless letters, and we haven't run into any issues with it thus far.
Okay, that's good. Well, I think what's important right now today is the fact that these are not definite changes that we're talking about, that you still have a lot of outreach to do to the community, to the Historic Society, et cetera, right?
Anything code and policy related, that's why we're here this afternoon, is to seek that direction to start a public engagement process.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Councilmember Satcher.
In a couple of places, staffing. How many staff are you short right now?
Councilmember, I would need to go back and take a look. I know that we have at least 4 or 5 vacancies in our planning division, several in our building and safety as well. I would have to go back and take a look at the total number.
And the vacancies that you do have, are the bulletins out for it?
We do have some out right now, yes.
Are all of them
we have
out?
some lists already established. We're doing interviews for others right now as well.
So all the vacancies that you have are on
There is some form of requisition out for them right now.
Okay, I think one of the things that we had talked about, and I know that I made a note of last time, was provided that this is a very hefty task to take on and it's become one of our priority areas, coming back to you and asking, like, what do you need from us to be successful in this space? The number of staff members in each of the departments, what you're lacking. If we're not hearing from you, then it's going to be constantly, like, every time there's a report that comes, there's going to be a conversation about being short-staffed. So I'm looking to you, at least to tell us, it would be, the ideal situation would be if we restructure it this way and we had X number of staff that handle whatever it is that is on this list. Some of the items I think are, marked as long, where I would prefer to see them come back earlier. So that's why I'm asking, I don't want this to be a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year process if we're able to do it sooner. The online system user experience, I know on page 19, it says send automatic status updates to applicant. and then it's marked as already exists to listed contacts. What does listed contacts refer to?
Whoever is listed as the contact as part of that application receives automatic updates. Those go directly to that contact information that's been put in there.
Okay. I know that as of last week, someone had actually reached out to me saying, why do we have to log in to be able to see the status updates? Is there a way for the applicant and the contact to be added, that they all get, whoever's involved in it gets updates?
We are actually currently working on making a change where the applicant will be required to put the client's contact information in there so that they are updated as well.
Okay. In the long list, when do you anticipate having that one checklist in the beginning?
That is one of our next items that we would like to work on, the pre-application process and just overall and checklists in general. There's not one checklist that we could use that will cover everything. We would have to go back and update a number of them. But our pre-application process and our checklists are two of the major things that we would like to move on next.
Is there a timeline for it?
I would probably be able to give you a better estimate after I meet with the team tomorrow afternoon. A lot of it's pending the discussion that happens here today and what the council prioritizes.
Okay. And then I think this is something that we always all hear. When stuff gets done at planning and building and safety, the Glendale Water and Power meter portion is handled within GWP. And I think the last time you were here, we talked about, as part of the enterprise, figuring out how we move things to make it more seamless. Do you have any updates on that portion? Because I still keep hearing from people that it takes like 3-4 months. And I keep thinking, like, if a project's done,
We
and
actually
someone
have
has
a
to
meeting.
pay rent for 3-4 months in order for them to have their lights on, it's just,
Council member, we actually have a meeting scheduled next week with the AGM of Water over GWP to start some of those conversations on how we can alleviate that backlog. There's some things in there that there's some conflict in terms of priority, in terms of their review and ours, but also just how do we move these things along quickly. We've also been having those discussions with fire as well. We know that we've had some disconnect in timelines. So we have a number of possible solutions. I don't think today we would be prepared to discuss those now. But we are working towards it. We have been having discussions, meetings, and coming up with solutions. In fact, our building officials released bulletins in terms of certain improvements or projects that don't need a fire review at all, and cutting that out and that unnecessary wait.
Councilmember Sarkian, I would add that in GWP Electric, and primarily meter spotting, they had lost some staff because of turnover. They have recently been able to fill those positions, and they're going through the training process. So it's my hope and expectation that in the next couple of weeks or so, they'll be on board with processing these permits even in a faster pace.
okay. I think, at least for me, having things operate in silos make things difficult for residents and small business owners. They think that it's planning and building and safety that's in charge of it, and then that staff gets dinged for it, but then it turns out it's GWP. So just whatever, as we're going through the streamlining process, whatever we can do to restructure to make it more efficient is what I'm looking for. Mr. Calvert, I think some of the questions that I had, I would like, when you have the answers for it, to come back as a memo before the rest of the items come back to council. I don't want to wait longer to have, and if need be, based off of those responses, based on staff and so forth, I know that we have a budget session coming up, and so I don't want to prolong those items. Thank you so much for the work.
Okay. Councilmember Najarian? Councilmember Kasakian?
I think a lot of the items that I wanted to bring up were also brought up by my colleagues. My main concern is our responsiveness and that, in general, spirit of customer service when someone comes in and requests to see someone. I understand that some people may be obstinate and be somewhat difficult, but in the very least, we should adhere to our own standards of professionalism and give people a response within 24 hours, even if that response is that whatever they're working on is going to request some more time for a more substantive or thorough response. What I keep hearing is that it is very difficult to meet with staff, to see people. And I understand we wanted to introduce a digitization of the process to make sure that things were easier to submit, that not everyone had to come in to see someone in person. But I think it's the essence of public service to be available to our end user, the public. And if that means that we need to be creative in how we staff up and how we ensure that we have the available bodies in the city to create that experience, I'm most interested in supporting and voting for policies that will ensure that. To me, that's absolutely critical. It's not a matter of always telling the customer that they're right, as much as it is just always being able to interface with the customer face to face, even if the answer may sometimes be no. So those are just my takeaways from this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Najarian.
Okay, good comments. Thank you, Bradley. I have a question on the outreach that you plan on doing. Can you explain to me what your general plan is for the outreach from the public?
Councilmember Najarian, we don't have a current plan in place right now. What we want to do is find out from the council if this list is acceptable. I believe that this is probably going to have to be broken into several different distinct pieces so that we're pairing up topics that are similar. And then we will engage with the public, we will engage with stakeholders, we will engage with the applicants. Many of those are they are public facing, they impact what is facing the public realm. So we would like, and per council's direction at the last meeting, obtain that feedback from the residents in addition to the applicants and stakeholders.
So what I really have in mind is, I don't want you to have, and the list is fine. I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive list. But I don't want you to sit down and have an outreach session with just developers. I don't want you to sit down and have an outreach session with just the Historical Society. The people, I think, that are really concerned for me are the public, folks that have maybe just recently gone through the system and can explain what difficulties and what frustrations they had as individuals. The developers may overstate those difficulties. Historical Society may understate it, but I want to hear it from those folks that have gone through it, succeeded or not succeeded, and hear from them. And I don't know how you would get a group of them. They're not a group per se. There's not a group of, permit applicants anonymous that meet and talk about their issues with each other. But get to the real people, the average person that wants to get through this system. That's who I'm really interested in hearing from.
Councilmember Najarian, there might be a group of frustrated homeowners anonymous out there that we're not sure of that exist, but we actually were thinking we could go back to recent applicants, pull contact information, ask them to sit down and participate in some sort of roundtable panel discussion, whatever it may be, and that could include homeowners for large-scale projects, small-scale business owners, TIs, things of that nature. That's very much what we expect to do.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, sir.
Okay. You have another point? Okay.
I thought the last time that this item was back here, we had agreed that part of that outreach was going to be to individuals who have applied for a permit in the last 5 years. That's what I walked away from the last time we talked about this in the outreach. That it wasn't, I'm in line with what Councilmember Najarian is saying. but looking at really business owners and homeowners and so forth. And then as it comes to not just huddle sessions in person, but the way that the survey is prepared, a lot of times, unfortunately, when I see these outreach surveys that have been put together, it almost feels like it's not done by somebody that specializes in that. And so it doesn't have logic, it doesn't have, if-then scenarios within it. So, as you're doing that outreach, I definitely would want to make sure that individuals that have that background are the ones that are designing that.
Okay. We do have a caller, but let me make some my comments first. And I want to thank all my colleagues for their great questions and comments, because most of what I was thinking about has been covered. But I want to mention them so that you know you're hearing it from more than just one of us. The kind of that whole area of scope of the DRB, the authority of the DRB, appeals fees, DRB qualifications. I want to be careful there. I understand that sometimes there's certainly a perception that the DRB is a barrier, but and I'm not opposed to being a little bit more strategic about what goes to the DRB and what doesn't, because I know some of, maybe some really small projects that aren't going to have much impact don't need to go through that process. But, I also want us to remember that although we want more development, we want more housing, certainly, we also want to make sure that we get good quality. And there's nothing that we can do to undermine support for development better than allowing kind of soulless, bland architecture go up. And that's happened in the past, and we've heard a lot about it. So we want to make sure that we don't allow that. So we really need a balance there. And I agree. I think the appeals fees are probably not something that we need to touch at this point. That would be my opinion. I think $2,000 is a significant barrier already for people that are putting out the tin cup to raise money to challenge something that they think is going to be, have a negative impact where they live. And I do think, there are people out there for sure that just, they say, we don't want any more housing, we have enough housing. We hear people come to council. We don't need any more housing. We know that's not true. But I think the majority of the people that we hear from aren't like that. They're saying, no, we get it. We get it that we need more housing. We need to update, but we want it to be something that we're proud of, something that we're going to enjoy living with. So anyway, I really wanted to emphasize that point. The thing about historic preservation, yeah, I think if you can be specific that it's about non-contributors in historic districts, and I've mentioned this to you as well. I know that, historic districts were kind of automatically excluded from some of the state laws that allowed for lot splits and duplex and things like that. And I don't necessarily think that makes sense when it comes to the non-contributors. I think we can have what you call, I like the term, gentle density in the R1 zones, also in historic districts for non-contributors, as long as it's compatible with the size and the scale of the surrounding properties. I think that's perfectly acceptable. So I'm okay with that. But going beyond that to say we're going to, allow more changes in historic districts, I don't understand really what that means. If we're bound by the Secretary of the Interior and we're bound by the historic district guidelines, and that, what else is there, right? We should be allowing what we allow, unless for some reason we're the Historic Preservation Commission is not allowing stuff that technically should be allowed. Then it seems to be more a matter of education and direction to them than changing the rules. Anyway, that's just a point I wanted to make there. Let's see, staffing, yeah, I totally agree with what Councilmember Satrian said. Let us know what you need. We all think this is one of our highest priorities. We want to make sure you have the resources that you need to get it done. And if it's not necessarily staffing, but third-party services.
I'm just not able to mute myself, so
Um,
any sounds you make are going to be picked up here, by the way.
Anyway, so those I think are the main, and I agree completely, with Councilmember Kasakian's comment about customer service. I think that should be a primary focus is your category staffing and work culture. We do need to think of ourselves as a service organization and make sure that our customers feel like they're being heard, even when they can be sometimes a little intransigent or stubborn. But that's a skill that I guess you have to develop. Is how do you deal with those situations and sometimes tell people something that they don't really want to hear in a good way. Anyway, the last point I think I have, I'm looking down at my list, is that as we make it easier to get permits for small things in particular, I want to make sure we're also enforcing against people that are doing unpermitted work. Like we need to do both, right? We want to streamline. I mean, part of the reason I think some people just end up doing unpermitted work is they feel like we're so difficult to deal with. It'll take so long. As we fix that, let's make sure that then we hold people accountable for doing it the right way. So I would like to include that in the mix. That's, I think, all I have. I do want to go to the caller, but Councilmember Devine, you have another comment?
If I may, kind of to piggyback on what the mayor said, one of your near ongoing items is providing cross-training for code enforcement to understand construction. And then at the bottom, you're encouraging code enforcement staff to write more descriptive and reports and notices. What I'd like to see is consistency in code enforcement, and I think that should be one of your goals. That when I don't know if right now you have one code enforcement officer assigned to a project, or if 2 or 3 different ones can be sent out at different dates. And if that's the case, then they should all be on the same page. And because I know that, I hate to say this, but for 10 years, all I've been hearing is one code enforcement staff comes out, tells me one thing, then another one comes out, says another thing, and then I have to change back to whatever I was doing, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that you are encouraging consistency in code enforcement and in their training, that they all are on the same page on all of the guidelines.
Councilmember Devine, the only thing I would add to that is when somebody's been assigned to that case for code enforcement, it is the same person that sees that project through or sees that case through from beginning to end, as long as they remain as a staff member with us. So I'm not sure about hearing from a different code enforcer getting a different answer or solution, because that person carries that through for the life of it.
But doesn't he have to actually be a project? It'd just be someone that's called out to look at, a possible infraction, and just make sure that they're all on the same page and they all are going out, seeing the same thing, and then filing. And I guess there's probably a way you can read these reports and kind of see what, if you get a complaint, you can look to see what the first enforcement officer said and then the next staff, et cetera. But I think that's important, consistency.
Okay, let's go to our, well, I'd like to go to our caller. Then we still have time if there are more comments, but we have her waiting. Yes, Joanna Pringle, right?
Joanne, you're live. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Joanna Pringle. On behalf of Verdugo Woodlands West Neighborhood Association, thank you and the staff for aiming to improve entitlements and permitting. We also question some of the proposed changes. The rationale for raising the appeal fee is to discourage land use planning through stakeholder opposition via DRB. As Councilmember Devine just noted, where is the data to support the conclusion that appeals are used as an end run around land use planning? The vast majority of appeals are brought by neighbors who believe that the DRB erred in approving a project based on a staff recommendation that they believe was ill-considered. Usually neighbors argue that the findings of neighborhood compatibility cannot be made, and the project design is poor. That is not land use planning, and it is also common in other cities. The only relevant example is the appeal of the density bonus project regarding 246 North Jackson. That was an extraordinary case and involved documented malfeasance on the part of the city. As Mayor Brotman said, $2,000 is a significant deterrent to resident appellants. For all the studies being undertaken into staff salaries at other cities, for example, why is there no study of how many appeals Glendale has had in the last 5 years? How that number compares to neighboring cities, what neighboring cities charge, and how many of those involved land use planning challenges? There should be some actual data before changes are contemplated. Staff proposed to study allowing for more changes to properties that are historic or in historic districts. Glendale already allows changes to historic properties, including substantial additions. Changes need to meet the historic district guidelines and changes need to meet the historic district guidelines and the Secretary of the Interior standards. If proposed changes do, then they can be approved. Again, as Mayor Brotman noted, isn't this item unnecessary? Staff proposed study getting rid of density limits in favor of floor area ratio limits. This would be okay in a world without the state's density bonus mandates. How would this work exactly, given that the city cannot impose a limit on floor area ratio if a developer requests a concession to increase it? How do you calculate a 40% density bonus if the number of potential units is infinite? Cities are no longer allowed to downzone. Glendale would never get the density limit back, at least not in the foreseeable future. The consequences of this are foreseeably bad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No other calls.
Mayor, that was the only caller.
Okay. Other final
I
comments?
had
Councilmember Sutton.
just on the appeals, because it seems like two of our colleagues have made comments. Do you need comments from the rest?
Mayor, council members, the appeal fee will be studied as part of the fee study, and I think it should be made clear that we are not proposing to arbitrarily raise the appeal fee to make some unnecessary hurdle or barrier. We need to set that fee commensurate with the work that's being done. That would be the discussion as part of the fee study. Any change to that would be to evaluate the amount of work that goes into it, the amount of staff hours that goes into it, and that fee reflects what that body of work is. Maybe that's not made clear in there, but this isn't a request to arbitrarily raise it. We're not requesting to raise it. It was a point that was brought up by the stakeholders, and it's something we're evaluating as part of our fee study as well. And if I could offer one more clarifying point based on the last comment there regarding the FAR versus 200 units per acre, there's a conversion factor when working with the state and state density bonus projects. That is an inaccurate statement that's infinite density. That's not possible. Unit sizes have to be a minimum size regardless of whether or not we have a rule or not, but there is a conversion factor that is already in place. We currently use it with our downtown projects for density bonus projects.
Okay, well, I think as it relates to the appeals, at least for the last year and a half that I've been here, this council has had in front of it public hearings that every single time have resulted into like 5-0 in basically wasting the applicant's time with bogus appeals. Is there a way for us to address that? I'm all for appeals that have ground, but it breaks my heart. I keep remembering that woman that waited 7 years to build her home. Last time, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, we had a gentleman, his appeal had 0 base, and it was talking about children not living next door. So, where can we draw boundaries where we're also safeguarding residents that this is not used as a delay tactic? I'm all for appeals if it has grounds, right? So.
Councilmember, we're working on alternatives for that. If there's something that can be done if there's an erroneous or, I guess that's probably the best way to describe it, appeal that's being made that can be brought forth for a council decision beforehand, but we're not quite ready to discuss what those alternatives are. We do plan on bringing that back at a future date, though.
Okay, I really would like to see that. I know it's something we've been talking about for a while. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further comments, can I have, is this a note and file? Or?
This was a motion to provide feedback, so it could be a motion to provide feedback as provided by the council members.
Okay, so I'll entertain that motion to provide feedback as provided by the council members.
So moved. So moved.
Okay, we got a motion, Councilmember Devine, a second from Councilmember Asaturian. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Asadurian,
Yes.
Devine,
Yes.
Kasakian,
Yes.
Jarian,
Yes.
Mayor Brotman.
Yes. And I guess next is adjournment.
Correct.
Do I have a motion to
I'll
adjourn?
move to adjourn.
Hey, we are adjourned at 4:03 PM. Thank you. I got you.
Thank you. You got it. Thank you. Thanks. Mayor, we're live with closed session.
Okay, calling to order the Glendale City Council for closed session, March 26th, 4:03 PM. May we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Asadurian,
Here.
Devine,
Here.
Kasakian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
and Mayor Brotman.
Here. And may we have your report, please?
One would be closed session, 1A conference with legal counsel pending litigation, Teresa's versus City of Glendale, LASC, case number 19STCV07748. B, public employee performance evaluation, city attorney, conference with labor negotiators, city designated negotiator, Mayor Dan Brotman, unrepresented employee position, city attorney. D, conference with labor negotiators, city designated representatives, Paula Adams and Laura Kelty, employee organization, Glendale Police Officers Association. Mayor, I did hand you a card for item 1D.
Yes, so, thank you. So for 1D, we have Herbert Milano. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor Brodman, members of the City Council. I'm addressing this particular issue as you go into closed session for the discussion of the MOU, but it really is applicable to practically all negotiations having to do with labor adjustments and the changes to the MOUs as they come up. Very often, at the very beginning of the MOU, on the first few pages, you find one of the primary incentives for increasing of the salary is called a salary adjustment. And from what I've heard, oftentimes before the City Council, when the council did special adjustments to salaries, it had to do with the cost of living increase or the consumer price index. The consumer price index for the past year, from February to February, was 3.2%. The consumer price index changes in the last 10 years is about 30%. But in the statistical pages of your CAFR, pages 226 to 27, you'll find that the police department has increased the overall cost by 60%. Same with the fire department. And obviously, some of the drivers are the labor cost. They're the primary drivers. But if the City Council were to consider the CPI as a driver towards salary adjustment, there's a problem. And the problem is that the CPI is comprised of different sectors: food, health, energy, housing, and so on. And food cost is about 46%. The average family in the United States spends about $7,500 in food a year. So a CPI is really applicable to someone, let's say, on Social Security, because the income is very low and a good percentage of that income really goes towards covering your basics. But when someone is earning or getting total compensation of $150,000, $200,000, $300,000, applying that percentage of the CPI overstates the benefit. And if food is 46%, obviously their burden has not increased that significantly in proportion to their overall salary. And the same thing with medical. If the city is paying for the majority of the medical insurance, then it bears to mind that they should not be getting a proportionate amount of the rate of the CPI increase in medical because the city is paying for it. So by my rough calculation, at least 50% of that CPI should not be considered as part of the salary increase. And that is where you start the process of the compensation, and I'm suggesting for the city to consider the fact that the CPI may be overstating and inflating those costs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, do we anticipate reporting out on any of the items today?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. With that, we'll recess to closed session.